Hello and welcome to another edition of Final Cut Pro Help Live. My name is Jared Ewing and I thank you so much for tuning in and joining us today. We have one quick topic to talk about today. If you do have something you want to see or know more about, don't hesitate to put it down in the chat here. But today I want to talk about something that for some people is very simple. If you're an experienced editor, you may have done a lot using clips and transitions and working with those transitions in the timeline. But I know for newer editors and even some experienced editors, dealing with transitions on the magnetic timeline and some of the results you get can be a little confusing. And I did get a question about that earlier today. So I want to provide some clarity around that in this live stream. It's the only topic I have planned for today, so let's dive right into it. I do have a kind of completed project here, but what I'm going to do is hit Command A to select all my clips. I'm going to hit the delete key to remove them all off the timeline. We're going to start from scratch here, and I encourage you to do the same thing when you're messing around with your timeline and playing with it. Just get some sample clips, some test things that you can play with and go through it. If you need some sample footage, there's plenty of that online. There's sites like Pexels and a couple other ones. No sponsors here, but there are a couple sites out there that you can go to. Just do a search on the web for stock footage and you'll find plenty of it. So I'm going to grab two clips here. I have one of, let's do this, some pizza toppings here. And then the other clip on the timeline is this shot, this close up here of the kid's boots stomping in the rain. So if we play this right now, pretty straightforward, it's going to be a cut from this clip right to the next clip, right? So if we go back, up arrow, left one frame, this is the end of this clip. We know it's the last frame of this clip because of this little kind of LJ icon here in the lower right corner. That lets us know it's the last frame. If we go right one more frame, notice that same symbol is over here on the left side, letting us know it's the first frame of this pizza clip. So this is a cut. When you just switch from one shot to the next, the transition is a cut. Some would say this is the absence of a transition in Final Cut. It's just cutting from one clip to another. Because a transition in Final Cut Pro here, we can go over to the transition browser, which is all the way to the right of your toolbar here, or Control Command 5 to view the transition browser here. And the transition browser lets us see more of your complex transitions. And if you scrub across any of these transitions, you'll see a preview of it in the little window and up here in the viewer, transitioning from the orange clip to the blue clip there, just to give you a preview of that transition. Applying a transition is very simple. You just click and drag it from your transition browser in between the two clips where you want to apply that transition. If you drop it, like I did in this case, and you get this error message that says there is not enough extra media beyond the clip edges to create the transition, basically what's going to happen here for you to apply this transition is what's called a ripple trim. And that's okay. You can just say create transition. What's going to happen on your timeline, let me hit cancel. I'll show you if we zoom out here with Shift Z. Notice the end of the timeline right now is right at this area. If we add a transition and apply a ripple trim by saying create transition, notice how now we're a little bit shorter because to apply that transition, it had to shorten the clips to give some extra media to apply it. All right. And now if we play this transition, we'll see it happen there in the viewer. Here it kind of lagged because it's not rendered. If you don't do anything, you'll get your background rendering will go through. You can also do Control R to render a selection, which will be right in this little spot here. There's our band transition going from one clip to the next then. Right, pretty straightforward. I'm going to do Command Z a couple times to undo that. To avoid getting that message, this one here where it says we need to do a ripple trim, if you can avoid getting that message, it means you have a much better control of your footage there. What you'd want to do before trimming or before adding that transition is just trim the beginning and the ends of your clips and that provides or gives extra media to be available for the transition. If you want to see this in a little bit more detail, just double click on your edit point. It'll open up our precision editor here inside of Final Cut Pro. And notice this footage here on the right side of the first clip, and then our second clip down here on the left side. This is that extra media that the transition is going to use. So now if I add my band transition to this edit point right here, notice we now see a diagonal line going through both of these. I'll use Command plus to zoom into a little bit. Notice this is now where the transition's happening. So we have that extra media to make that happen. Again, one more demo. I'm going to do Command Z to get rid of that. Command Z a bunch of times here to add those clips without trimming them. So now they're both at the max. And then let me go into the precision editor here. So notice how there's no footage over here or here. If I try to apply that bands transition, there's no extra media. So we have to create it. So I'm just going to hit create transition, and notice how it drags it over so that those clips can overlap. I know that can sound a little bit confusing, but hopefully that makes sense here. So that's how you add a transition. You just click and drag it from the transition browser onto your clips. You can also select multiple clips. So we could select both of these, and then when we double click it, it's going to add 3 transitions at the beginning, in the middle of the 2 clips, and at the end. Double click, it adds 3 transitions at once. So that's how you can add a transition across multiple clips and multiple edit points at the same time. You can also use Command T as in transition. Command T to add the default transition, which if you don't change it, it's a cross dissolve. If you want, you can right click or control click on any transition in the transition browser and then click on make default. And then when you do Command T, it'll add that transition. So those are kind of the big things to point out just for normal transition work, right? Pretty straightforward. Now, what happens if we are not adding a transition to a clip on the primary storyline? All right, so I'm going to click on this clip. I'm going to do Option Command Up. Option Command Up lifts that clip off of the primary storyline. Now I can drag it wherever I want. And now let's add that same bands transition. Notice I can drag it right onto this clip. And if I drop it, it adds it to the beginning and the end of that connected clip. But it also puts this clip into a secondary storyline. So notice if I click on the secondary storyline back here, that clip is now in a secondary storyline with those transitions. Okay, so that's one thing to note. And then if we play this back, take a look at what this looks like. It basically looks the same as our transition before, going from the clip that's down here up to the one in the secondary storyline. Okay, so that's a whole bunch of stuff around transitions, kind of a crash course there. Let me go in and create another example project. This is the one that I got a message about. I'm going to go into my titles and generators sidebar here. I'm going to go into generators. I'm going to grab a solid, and we're going to get one of these white solids just to have a white background here, right? Pretty straightforward. I'm going to go into the generators tab. I'm going to change it from a smoky. Let's get like a mint white, maybe ivory, right? You get all these different shades of white that you can have here. Bright white's kind of a standard white without a tint on it, but here we go. We got an antique white background. I'm going to go into my snowboarding project. I'm going to grab my Final Cut logo here. I'll drag that. This is the Final Cut Pro Help logo here. I'll scale it down and put it on the left side. And then I'm going to grab some text under my basic title. And let's do just the @ sign. Right, pretty straightforward layout here. I have a logo with some text and a background, which in this case is just a solid color background. So this is like I said, it's a standard setup that I see a lot of people use, especially if you're at maybe the end of a project. You want to put your logo and and some text. So this is going to be what you do. Now let's layer all these. So I'm going to drag it to the left. I'm going to extend my logo so it's out across the entire length of the project there. I'm going to hit N to turn snapping back on. That way I can really quickly line up all of these things to the end there. And now looking at this, it's okay, but let's do them stacked. Will probably look a little bit better. So I'll move my title. Then I go to my video inspector here, and I can just double click on the X position here, hit 0. Same thing with the logo. Go up and hit 0 on the X position. That way those things are centered. Right? Pretty straightforward. So now let's talk about transitions, right? Because let's say we want to transition in and out of the logo and the text to something different. So what I'm going to do here is just click on my logo, and I'm going to hit Command T to add a cross dissolve at default transition, and let's see what happens. So if I go back to the beginning, what we should be seeing here, I go back to the select tool here. I'm going to have to re-render this one because it's being a little goofy with us. Might be because we're editing between libraries there. But here we go. We have our white page here. Hit the space bar. Plays back. At this point, we see the white background there is what we expect. And then when we get to the logo, we transition on. But notice how the text did not transition on, right? Only the logo at the top here, which is this clip, is transitioning onto the screen, and the text just pops on the screen. It does not transition on. So how do we get this text to also transition onto the screen? Well, I can click on the text and then do Command T, and now I've added that transition to that text. So now if I go through frame by frame on this one, notice we get the white background, and now both the text and the logo there are transitioning onto the page. Okay, so that's how you can get that to happen. Let me go in my view here. I'm going to shrink these down a little bit further because another thing you may do, let's go grab another generator here. We'll go to solids. I'm going to grab one of my vivid, actually let's do the custom color here. It's the one I like usually for creating a custom colored background. And let's just do a kind of a lighter blue-ish color there. Let's drag all this over. And now let's say we want to transition between colors. So I'm going to do Command T in the background there. So this is another layout that you might have where you can see those things transition onto the screen. And then in the background, we have our transition to the white there. Okay, so the biggest thing here to note and to call out is that your transition that's on the primary storyline does not necessarily affect the clips that are above it. Okay, that's something that I see a lot of editors kind of skip over. They don't necessarily grasp the concept of it initially, but your transitions on the primary storyline and your clips are specific to the clip that you're attached to there. So hopefully that provides enough clarity on what you see there and how you use that. Same thing with the person I was working with online. Essentially what they had is clips that were connected together. So I guess I should show this too. This is a second thing. Let's delete these titles and secondary storylines. So let's say you do have your background clips here and they're doing whatever they do, and then you want to have some connected clips that are transitioning together. Okay, so same thing. I'm gonna go into my stock clips here and let's grab one of these pizza clips. I'm gonna use the scale parameter over here just to shrink them down. Let's say these are just two clips that are in the center of the screen here. We'll do 50% scale. I'll grab, let's grab one of the rain shots again. The reason I'm using these clips is they're very different as far as visuals go, so it should be pretty obvious when they're transitioning together. And we'll do it over the the white background. So same thing here. I'm going to shrink this one down to 50% just so that they're layered on the timeline. So notice we have that white background there, right? Going for the pizza clip to the next clip here. Right now, if we zoom into it, right now, these two clips are their own clips. They're not part of a secondary storyline. So if I select this clip, the pizza toppings, and I do that Command T, right, to add the default transition, it's only around the pizza topping clip and not anything to do with the kids here. So if I drag this kid's foot here, they're dancing in the rain, I drag it up against this other clip, they're not actually transitioning together. This transition is happening before the kids playing in the rain clip starts. So if I play this, take a look at it. And it's doing that weird little glitch there where it doesn't want to load it for some reason. Just so you know, if you're running into this issue, all I'm doing is double clicking on one of the other projects to load it, and then I'm going back to my dog's clip here. Just ran an update, so that may have something to do with it. All right, let's play this back. So you can see it transitions with this pizza topping clip onto the screen, and then that fades out, and all of a sudden the next clip just pops right onto the screen. And that's because this clip, the kids playing in the rain, is completely separate right now from the pizza toppings. So how would I transition from the pizza toppings into the kids playing in the rain? I'd have to bring this into this secondary storyline that's here. So I can click and drag it and bring it in. And notice if I hold down for just a second with the mouse without dragging, it puts it inside the secondary storyline. Let me zoom into it so you can see hopefully a little bit clearer. So I drag it over and notice that to the left there, notice behind the clip or just above where it says 310, notice that gray area back there in the light blue outline. That's where it's going to put this clip, which is inside the secondary storyline, and it's going to connect it to my cross dissolve there. So I've let go of it. Notice it's inside this secondary storyline. If I click on this, I can drag this around and move it, but it's also now part of this transition. So let's zoom out. Let's play it back again. And what you'll see is we fade into the pizza toppings and we fade right on down to the stomping of feet in the rain there. So that's something to keep in mind, is that transitions need to happen in the same storyline. Okay? They can't just be their own clips out with a transition. They need to be on the same storyline. So that's what I was seeing happening in the clip that was sent to me, is essentially when they sent me the picture of the timeline, it looked like this, where it was just two clips next to each other. There was a transition down here on the primary storyline, but there was no transition on the clips that were connected to it, which in the example happened to be text clips. So if that's the case, if you have connected clips and there's no transition on them and you want there to be a transition, make sure to select those and then add your transition, or select them and put them into a secondary storyline, which you can go up to the clip menu and say create storyline, or press Command G, and that'll put them into a storyline, and then you can add that transition as well. Okay, so, well, that's what I wanted to talk about today. I don't see any comments in the chat there. If you do have something you want to be demoed or have a separate topic you want me to kind of talk about right now, go ahead and pop that into the chat. I see a hi in there. Hello. Thank you so much for joining and tuning in. I hope you're finding value in these tips that we're providing here. And you may have seen as well, we're posting more videos on the channel all the time. So make sure to hit that subscribe button, and you can hit the little bell. That'll let you know when we do go live and get on here. I do see a question that came in over on Twitter. And the person says that their Final Cut Pro 10 keeps crashing when they're trying to export, and it's driving them nuts. So if you're having issues with Final Cut, I've demoed this a number of times, but the first place I recommend starting as far as your troubleshooting goes is to an article from Apple titled Resolve an Issue with Final Cut Pro 10. And you can go on to your browser, whatever search engine you like, and just search that, resolve an issue with Final Cut Pro. So here I just did a Google search of it, and you'll see the first thing that comes up, actually right here, is one of my YouTube videos, but you'll notice the second one here is the article itself. If you want, you can definitely watch my Final Cut Pro 10 Resolve an Issue video. I go into these steps in more detail, but this is the first place you should start, especially if you're not really sure why you're having an issue. Now, this person specifically, they said it keeps crashing when they're trying to export. So I'm assuming you have a project that you've created and you're trying to export. So again, definitely go through these steps because it's very possible that one of these steps will give you some really clear instructions. But if you go up and you hit that share button and you choose one of the export options and it crashes, it could be specific to one of your projects or one of your media clips that's causing the issue. Step one, though, definitely restart your Mac. That fixes so many of the issues. Go through the rest of these, but I'd be very curious to see what happens when you get down to step 9 and step 10. If you try using another user account and the issue is fixed, then you know it's something in your user account and not the test one that you created. But I'd also be curious if you use a new library and a new project if this happens. One of the fastest ways to test a project, let's say this project here, which is called Dogs at Final Cut Pro Help. Let's say that project was giving me an issue, and every time I shared it, my Final Cut just closed out and it quit. Very easy to test this. What I'm going to do is hit Command A to select everything on my timeline down here on my project. I'm going to do Command C to copy it. I'm going to do Command N to create a new project, and I might call this my test project or my Dogs at Final Cut Pro Help 2. Give it a name. Make sure you always name your projects. That's way you know and can keep organized. And then hit Return to say OK, and do Command V to paste everything into this new project. Almost all of that was just done, or really all of that was done with the keyboard. And now you can do Command E or go up to the Share menu and choose your export option to export that project and send it out. It's possible that something got corrupted in one of your projects here by opening up a new test project and creating it and exporting it. You may find that resolves the problem there. So I'll shoot you over a link if you're not watching now. Hopefully you'll watch it in the future, and we'll see if that resolves it. If not, send me a direct message, and I'd be happy to dive into it a little bit further there. So that's all I see. I don't want to see any new questions or comments coming in. Again, you can always reach me too on Instagram at Final Cut Pro Help, and be glad to help out with any questions you have on there. You can also go to anawesomeguide.com. Let me bring that site up here, anawesomeguide.com. If you are having problems with Final Cut, you can schedule training, one-on-one training if you want to. There's also a support tab here that I have. If you click on support, there's a little form you can fill out to reach out to me. If you're having problems, please also go down. I've added a list of questions here, just 10 questions that will really help speed up the troubleshooting process. The more information you can provide me, the quicker we can fix your problems, get you back up and running with Final Cut there. So thank you all for tuning in. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, hit the little bell. You'll be notified when we go live next. I don't know when that'll be, but sometime soon. Have a wonderful rest of your day.